The station, the train whistle cut through the morning air like a knife through silk. Margaret Hayes stood on the platform with her carpetbag at her feet and her heart beating somewhere in the hollow of her throat. She'd been standing there for 2 hours. The sun had climbed higher. The platform had emptied, and still no one had come to meet her. She touched the scar on her left cheek without meaning to. It was an old habit, checking to see if it was still there as if it might have disappeared during the night. The burn mark ran from her temple to her jaw, a river of puckered skin that made children stare and women look away. She'd gotten it 5 years ago when a lamp had tipped over in her bedroom back in Boston. The fire had taken her beauty and shortly after, her fiancé's interest. But Thomas had seemed different. Thomas Miller, who'd written her letters for 6 months, who'd said he needed a wife for his ranch in Wyoming, who'd promised that what mattered was character, not appearance. She'd believed him. She'd sold everything she owned. She'd traveled 2,000 miles on faith and a handful of letters written in careful, deliberate handwriting. Now she stood alone on a platform in a town called Redemption, and the name felt like a cruel joke. The station master emerged from his office, a thin man with spectacles that caught the light. He looked at Margaret with something like pity in his eyes. "Miss," he said gently, "the next train east doesn't come through until Thursday. If your party doesn't show, you're welcome to wait in the office." Margaret nodded. She couldn't speak. If she spoke, she might cry, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore. She'd used up all her tears in Boston, in the mirror. Watching her fiancé's face change when he first saw the burn, she was still standing there, trying to decide what to do with the rest of her life, when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. She looked up. A man was riding toward the station on a bay mare, his hat pulled low against the sun. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his whole life on horseback. As he came closer, Margaret saw his face. The right side was marked with scars, old ones white and raised, running from his hairline down to his collar. They looked like claw marks, though she couldn't imagine what could have done such damage to a man and let him live. He stopped a few feet away from her. His eyes were blue, the color of the sky before a storm. He looked at her face, really looked at it, not away from it, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Margaret Hayes?" he asked. His voice was rough, like stones tumbling in a river. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm Jacob Porter. I work for Thomas Miller." He paused, and she saw his jaw tighten. "Mr. Miller asked me to meet you. He said to tell you he's sorry, but he can't go through with the marriage." The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Margaret felt them sink through her one after another. "Can't go through with the marriage." "I see," she said. Her voice sounded calm even to her own ears. Strange how calm she sounded when everything inside her was breaking apart. Jacob Porter shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable, as if he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "He sent money for your return ticket," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "And extra for a hotel if you need time before traveling." Margaret stared at the envelope. She didn't take it. "Did he say why?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No, ma'am. But I can guess. Because of this." Margaret touched her scar again. "Because he saw me get off the train and he changed his mind." Jacob's expression darkened. "Likely so. I told him about it in my letters," Margaret said. "I described it. I said I'd been burned. I said I wasn't beautiful anymore." "Then he's a fool," Jacob said quietly. Margaret looked up at him, startled. He was still watching her with those storm blue eyes, and there was no pity in them. Only something that looked like anger, but not directed at her. "A fool and a coward," Jacob continued. "Begging your pardon for speaking ill of my employer, but any man who'd leave a woman stranded at a station because of a scar isn't worth the ground he walks on." Margaret felt something warm kindle in her chest, like a coal that had been cold for years suddenly catching fire. "You're very kind," she said. "I'm not kind," Jacob said. "I'm honest." He paused, then added, "You're beautiful." The words hung in the air between them. Margaret stared at him. No one had called her beautiful since the fire. No one had even implied it. Most people couldn't look at her without flinching. "You don't have to say that," she said softly. "I don't say things I don't mean." Jacob took off his hat. The scars on his face were more visible now, stark in the morning light. "I got these from a mountain lion when I was 20. Thought I was going to die. Thought even if I didn't die, I'd never be able to look at myself again. But I learned something. What's that? That scars are just proof you survived something. They're not ugly. They're honest, he met her eyes. And you're beautiful because you're standing here with your head up, even after being treated worse than you deserve. That's the kind of beautiful that matters. Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were something else, something she didn't have a name for. I don't know what to do now, she admitted. I used everything I had to come here. I don't have a home to go back to. Jacob was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Then he said, I have a ranch. Small one, about 10 miles north of here. I run cattle, grow some wheat. It's not much, but it's mine. He paused. I could use help. A housekeeper. Someone to manage things while I'm out with the herd. The pay isn't great, but there's a spare room and the work's honest. Margaret looked at him carefully. Why are you offering me this? Because you need help, Jacob said simply. And because I know what it's like to be judged for something you can't control. He put his hat back on. No strings attached. You work for me. I pay you fair wages and you can save up for whatever you want to do next. If you want to go back east eventually, you can. If you want to stay in Redemption, you can do that too. Margaret picked up her carpetbag. Her hands were steady now. I accept, she said. Jacob smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines the scars had drawn. Good, he said. Let's go home. They rode north through country that seemed to stretch forever, all golden grass and blue sky. Jacob rode beside her in the wagon he'd brought, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the land. He talked about the ranch, about the cattle, about the neighbors who were few and far between, but good people when you needed them. Margaret listened and watched the horizon. For the first time in 5 years, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. When they reached the ranch, it was small and weathered but clean, with a garden that someone had tended with care. Jacob helped her down from the wagon and showed her to the spare room. It had a window that looked out over the prairie, and the afternoon light poured through it like honey. Thank you, Margaret said. For this. For all of it, Jacob nodded. We all need a second chance sometimes, he said. Welcome home, Margaret. That night she stood at her window and looked out at the stars. They were brighter here than they'd ever been in Boston, sharp and clear and impossibly beautiful. She touched her scar one last time, then let her hand fall away. Tomorrow she'd start her new life. Tomorrow, she'd learn the work of the ranch and the rhythm of this wild place. Tomorrow, she'd begin to understand that beauty wasn't something you lost in a fire or found in a mirror. It was something you carried inside you, even when the world couldn't see it. Especially then, and somewhere in the house she heard Jacob moving around, starting a fire, preparing dinner. She heard him humming quietly to himself, a tuneless melody that somehow sounded like contentment. Margaret smiled. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful.